The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome in, everybody. Keefer with you now for another edition of Need to Know. And we are excited, as always, to be here and most excited to be able to have this weekly opportunity to visit with all of you. Hope everybody had a good last 7 or 8 days since we got together the last time. It's October, and just being able to say that and enjoy what is by far the best month of the year, particularly if you are a fan of beautiful weather and big-time sports events. October, there's nothing like it, and really happy that we are in that time of year. Absolutely gorgeous to even walk around outside. It's really invigorating, and I know everybody's going to enjoy this fantastic month. I've got some sports items. Kind of a hodgepodge today. A lot of things you need to know that have gone on in the last 7 days that we're going to make you aware of. Some of them you probably heard or know, some of them perhaps not, but that's why we're here, so we can talk and tell you what you need to know. Let's start. I usually give a shameless promotion for my other show on Tony Kurre Radio. Want to bet? I'm a little more happy to report that this week because I had a good week on the picks. But again, if you're interested in sports betting, the informational part of the program, I have a great series of sit-down interviews with Keefer, who happens to be my son, but he's also one of the foremost experts on sports betting in the country, particularly football. And we've had some really compelling discussions that we air every week here on Tony Kurre Radio, as well as locally in Birmingham on CW21 at 11:30 on Saturday mornings. So you can catch that program. It's really interesting, and for me, it was really eye-opening because he is all based on numbers and data and current trends in analytics, where I'm kind of more of an old school eye test guy, kind of filing away in my head the weaknesses and strengths of various teams and seeing how they'll match up. And finally, in week 5, after kind of tough sledding in the first couple of weeks, got some games to go my way this week on my picks on that show. So check it out. Want to bet right here on Tony Kurre Radio every weekend. And it's information I think that you will really enjoy, and not only enjoy it, but have the opportunity to get some winning information. Let's start this week's discussion. I would say they're headlines, but when we're talking about our two supreme leaders, our president and vice president, and this is not going to be a show bashing Uncle Joe and crazy Kamala, but they both had their moments this week, and the word gaffe is an interesting word, which of course means saying something that you really should not have said, or mistakenly say, or trip over your own tongue, so to speak. But one of the all-time gaffes happened to Joe Biden this past week at a ceremony at the White House, where he stood up to celebrate the signing of a bill into law that the Congress passed on a bipartisan basis, which that's news in itself, that this Congress gets anything done. But this was basically a bill to commission studies and responses to hunger. And if anybody's against that, well, then I don't really agree with your politics or you personally. If anybody is supportive of people, not getting proper nutrition or any food sources at all. So hunger is certainly a bipartisan issue. Now, the government studying the issue is kind of puzzling and head scratching, but I guess some study and some kind of plan needs to be devised in dealing with major subjects. So we'll set all that aside. But at that ceremony, Joe Biden was recognizing people that had a contribution to making that bill a reality. And he looked around and he said, where's Jackie? Where's Jackie Walorski? She's a congresswoman from Indiana who had a lot to do with getting that bill drafted and getting the cooperation from both sides, Republican and Democrat. Tragically, on August the 3rd this year in Elkhart, Indiana, Congresswoman Jackie Walorski was killed in a horrible traffic accident. One of her staffers driving a Toyota RAV4, and they had a head-on collision. She and two of her staffers, including the driver, perished in that accident. It was a traumatic thing for, of course, everybody in that district and in the Indiana and in Congress itself. The White House, now this was August 3rd. This is not last year. This is not 2 years ago. This was just less than 2 months ago. The White House lowered their flags to half-mast. There was an observance. There was, talk about it. I don't recall any specific comments. I'm sure Joe Biden, our president, was quoted on the tragic loss of Congresswoman Walorski. But at this ceremony, just less than 2 months since her death, Joe Biden's looking around the crowd and going, where's Jackie? Where's Jackie Walorski? She's supposed to be here today. She's a big driving force in this bill. And I don't know if anybody finally kind of whispered to him or nudged him. But he was looking around the crowd. She was supposed to be here today, he said. So the long and short of that story is this president, as we've talked about, I don't think it's criticism. It's just pointing out reality that he's just not with it. I mean, the death of an acting congressperson, and you're the president, you have total awareness in that. And then the White House would not even walk it back and say, well, he got confused, he made a mistake. No. The press secretary said, well, she was on top of his mind because she was a driving force for this bill, and he really wanted to recognize her, and it's probably not that surprising that this happened. Not being able to know the difference between somebody who's living and somebody who's tragically deceased when they've only been gone for a short time, that's kind of a hard one to overlook. So it's just more evidence that our president is not all there. And this is not partisan politics. It's not being cruel. I've pointed out on this show many circumstances and examples of this president's, having a vacancy sign up in the gray matter area. And that was a dramatic display of that happening. Meanwhile, all is well because our vice president, and I just had a flashback of the classic scene in Animal House years ago, Kevin Bacon in one of his first major roles. And then, of course, we all know he went on to appear in numerous films. Kevin Bacon as an ROTC guy who was also in the real stuffy fraternity that caused all the problems for the fellas over at the Animal House. Remember the town was going crazy because of the demonstration and the mayhem that the Deltas had wreaked on the celebration parade, and Kevin Bacon was standing on the sidewalk imploring everybody who was running around in a frenzy that all is well, only to be trampled by a herd of about 100 fleeing people. The next shot, he's laying flat on the ground like a folded towel. But all is well because Kamala Harris is on the case. She's the border czar. She's in charge of all of our border policy, and recently said in an interview, the border is secure. Not so much. We've got millions of people streaming into the country illegally. We have runaway problem with the drug cartels and really gangland entities in Mexico who are making millions of dollars on this cottage industry of getting people to the border and getting them across, and also packing a lot of them down with the most deadly drug that we've seen, fentanyl, which is basically a synthetic opioid, and it is literally killing Americans in droves. Latest numbers are over 100,000 deaths from people taking this mistakenly, thinking it is some kind of muscle relaxer or whatever reason people resort to that kind of activity. But Kamala Harris did go to the border. How about that? That's a big headline. Oh, wait. It wasn't our southern border. It was the border between South Korea and North Korea at the DMZ. She showed up there and made a speech in which she declared that we have had a long and valued partnership with our great friends and allies from the Republic of North Korea. And then she went on to repeat that North Korea has been just a great partner for us in pursuit of stability and whatever else she said in this region. Of course, that was a gaffe. She, I hope, was referring to South Korea because we have no partnership with North Korea. North Korea really doesn't have a partnership with anyone. So that was kind of a bad gaffe to fly halfway around the world to declare our undying love and appreciation for our great partners in North Korea. And if that wasn't enough, Kamala came back to Washington and doubled down on the gaffe machine this weekend when declaring that with the horrible effects of the hurricane in Florida, Hurricane Ian, which was devastating, particularly to one of my favorite areas of Florida. I love the Naples, Fort Myers area. A lot of you may realize that I was in the racing business for a long time. The Naples Fort Myers track in Bonita Springs there. One of my favorite all-time assignments. I was privileged to be asked to call the Naples Fort Myers Derby and, delivered, I think, a really good performance that I was real proud of, and still go back and listen to that every once in a while from my younger days. Just unbelievably devastating damage there. And, when people are in disarray, their homes have been washed away, they've lost all their possessions, they're destitute for any kind of help and assistance. This is the time that all of us need to step up. But remember, the hallmark cry of the Democrat Party, unfortunately, in this era, has been something that was said by a Obama administration official, Rahm Emanuel, a number of years ago. In a speech, he said, we never can allow a crisis to go to waste. So this is the ultimate crisis. And Kamala Harris certainly stepped right up to the podium and stumbled and stammered around, declaring, well, there's a lot of people that need help, but I would think our first priority needs to be people that really don't have the means to help themselves. Well, in this situation, if people are desperate, it has nothing to do with means. It has nothing to do with color. It has nothing to do with economic status, because she added, so I would think equity is an important consideration in starting this approach to help people. So how do we interpret that? Does that mean that we're going to look for people of the lowest economic circumstance and give them the first opportunity to, get government help? That's not really the way this works. You come into an area and you help people that desperately need the help, and you don't start to quantify and identify the people that politically might be advantageous to help. Of course, in the throes of this terrible storm, and it was a really bad one. It was massively large. The winds were still going. The floods were coming in. The storm surge was incredible. And it's just absolutely unforgivable that all of these talking heads start popping up. And I'm not making this up. I saw at least 10 to 12 on Saturday, or excuse me, on Friday and into Saturday morning, people coming on saying things like, well, this is happening all the time, these monster storms. This is exactly why it's just unforgivable that people are climate deniers. This is all due to the carbon emissions and the irresponsibility we've had of creating this terrible situation. These storms are getting more frequent, more intense. One speaker on MSNBC said, this is happening all the time. Well, I understand a passionate response, and I understand the frustration of this kind of destruction, and I get that. Everybody I was on the edge of my seat, and all I could think about was people being in just horribly perilous situations and desperately needing help and hoping the storm would recede. It was just meandering along at such a slow pace. It kind of hung over Florida and did immense damage. But to jump right on this political bandwagon that this is all because of our irresponsibility as human beings, we're causing these phenomenons. Let me throw 3 years at you that are the 3 worst, most powerful hurricanes to make landfall in America in the last, we can even go half a century here. Well, actually, it's been more, almost a full century. The 3 most powerful storms took place in 1935. That storm was unnamed. In 1969, Hurricane Camille. And in 1982, Hurricane Andrew. Those are the 3 most powerful storms. This storm did not come close in overall intensity to those 3. So 1982 was the most recent, really Category 5 storm that did just incomprehensible damage, structural damage, and took many, many lives. This one, I think the death count is up to like 61, and that's just awful. But in this era of preparedness, that could be a lot worse. And I'm not diminishing. If we lose one person, that's just so sad, and I'm filled with grief for that person and their families. But the bottom line is, the other factor now is that Florida and these areas is so built up, and this is not how it's always been. That was like remote areas, the west coast of Florida for a long time. Even the Tampa Bay area was kind of a one-horse town until the middle part of the 1900s. Bottom line is, there's just a lot more property. There's just so much more humanity that's in the path of these things, that the results are going to be devastating when this occurs. But, to blame climate change for this happening, quote, all the time, and the intensity of these storms being so much greater, I certainly can concede, just looking at it from a common sense standpoint, if the waters are warmer, that could be a very reasonable explanation why this storm got a lot more vast in size before hitting on the west coast of Florida. And the fact that it was so gigantic increased the storm surge and a lot of the damage that we've seen here. But the fact that the water is warmer and allows it to gain intensity, that's where the assumption that anything we've done in this age of industrialization in the last 140 years, you can't just assume that's the reason the water temperature is warmer. This planet has been around for 4.5 billion, that's a B, billion years. And it's gone through probably so many cycles, so many changes. It's incalculable. So to say that the blip on the radar that we are is the contributing factor, is the only factor that's leading to these kind of events, is totally irresponsible, because there's really no scientist, I don't care how much data you have, that only goes back to probably the 1800s, to make the conclusion that the carbon emissions is responsible for instability. It's a theory, and I'll give you that, but there's no absolute proof or link to the fact that this can't just be natural planetary phenomenon. And it certainly is not the reason that hurricanes are present and a reality in our lifetimes, because hurricanes have been around since the beginning of this planet. You can go back for when they started tracking them, again, till the mid 1800s. There have been hundreds of hurricanes. Here's the real interesting fact that they don't tell you, that the people claiming this is happening all the time, until this hurricane, this has been probably the slowest. Well, actually, I use probably, that's wrong. It has been the most inactive hurricane season in 30 years. Yes, this was a massive storm and very deadly and very destructive, but this is not, quote, happening all the time. In fact, landfall hurricanes in the last 25 years are down almost 25%. So we're not getting them as frequently as at other eras. So all of this, Chicken Little sky is falling, screaming from the rooftops is really inappropriate. Moving on. Let's talk real quickly about, something that I don't want to get completely on a soapbox, but this is an area that I feel extremely passionate about, and it just incumbent on me to talk about it a little bit. I continue to listen to the rhetoric and hear the reaction of people around the country. Joe Biden appeared recently at the NEA convention, the National Education Association, which is the biggest lobby for teachers, run by just a repulsive woman by the name of Randi Weingarten, who is about as radical and hardcore leftist progressive that you can ever find. Unions that represent rank and file members don't necessarily reflect the opinions of those individuals that are in their union, but this union is as radical as they come, and this is the one behind all of the curriculum arguments that the schools have to be changed and children need to be taught all kinds of interesting theories like critical race theory, and now the insistence on sexuality and gender fluidity for early elementary school children is just appalling. And their position is that parents do not need to be involved or even know about these processes. And that's where the line has to get drawn, folks. Our children are our children. They're our responsibility as parents to nurture them, to take care of them, to make sure that they are being properly educated in our schools. And there has been rhetoric coming. Terry McAuliffe, who ran for governor of Virginia, was beaten by Glenn Youngkin, kind of a dark horse who nobody gave much of a chance to, Republican. That was the main reason that Youngkin got over the top against McAuliffe when he said that, parents don't need to be informed about what their children are being taught in school. Yes, they are. They're your children. And you have to give your children credit for being your offspring and part of you, and give them every opportunity to not be taught what to think, but taught how to think. I'm proud of the job I did as a father. I stayed on top of everything, but I never, ever told my kids what to think. I told them what I thought, and I encouraged them to use their brain that, again, is part of me and the mother of my children, Kathy. Use your brain and all the resources that you have to make your own decisions. And that's really what the main job of as a parent is. Hillary Clinton kind of, defined this movement for this ideological side of thought with her book, It Takes a Village. Well, certainly the more influences and the more information children can gather to make decisions for themselves in their lives are important to hear a lot of voices and a lot of diverse opinions. I'm all for that because, again, at the end of the day, you can count on your children. You don't need to shape what their thoughts are, as this education process seems hell bent to do. I'm going to go back 40 years or so and jump on board with Pink Floyd and Roger Waters. Hey, teachers, leave them kids alone. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control, no dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teachers, leave our kids alone. And like Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. Quickly, running out of time because I have a tendency to kind of ramble on here, and I understand that. Some sports shorts. Bryce Young is being evaluated today, the Alabama quarterback, hurt in the Arkansas game. Looks like Nick Saban's, who's not a doctor, by the way. He's everything else, but he's not a doctor. Nick Saban thought that it was probably a shoulder sprain. That could be a lot of different things. It could have been a partial dislocation. Hopefully it's not damage to the rotator cuff, which would be the worst injury possible, other than maybe a broken clavicle in that situation. But Bryce Young's status still up in the air, waiting to hear what his medical report is. Alabama overcame that and won that game against Arkansas with Young going out. The backup quarterback, Jalen, came in and did a great job. I've just blanked out here and forgot his last name, which is inexcusable. But anyway, Milroe. I don't know why that didn't come to mind. Jalen Milroe came in and did a fabulous job for Alabama. And, I saw something that really emphasized what I just talked about, parents and the influence they have on their kids. Jalen Milroe said after the game, he went into the injury tent and talked to Bryce Young before he went on the field and told him that God had his back, not to worry, and that he also knew that his faith in God and all the things that his parents had instilled in him was going to lead him to not being nervous. He was just going to go out and do his job, and he did it very well, leading Alabama to a big win over Arkansas. You also had an interview last week on the Paul Feinbaum show with Hendon Hooker, the quarterback for Tennessee, and he talked at length about his faith and his parents and the family unit being so important to him. These are things that make the left cringe. They're secular, they're anti-family, and it's wonderful to see these kids in these high-profile positions really having that kind of faith and that kind of appreciation for the opportunity they have and the great foundation that they've been given, both by their families and particularly their parents. So great story right there. I have to crow a little bit. The Atlanta Braves, World Series champions last year, have been climbing uphill all year, chasing I'm just going to say it, the hated New York Mets. And this weekend they had a 3-game series in Atlanta. They came into the series 1 game behind in the division. Guess what, everybody? They beat the reportedly 2 best pitchers in the National League, Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. And last night faced Bassett, another starter for the Mets, who had gone 8-1 in his last 10 starts. And the Braves swept them away, sent the New Yorkers home with nary a victory. The Braves have a 2-game lead in the division now. And if they can win 1 game this week in Miami in their final 3 games, or if the Mets lose 1 game, the Braves clinch the division for the 5th consecutive year and go on into the playoffs with the opportunity to perhaps repeat. Remember, it took a long, long time for the Braves to get back into the World Series stage, and they've got an excellent chance the way they're playing to do it again. So props to the Atlanta Braves. A big tomahawk chop to everybody in Braves country. And we're going to have a great October watching fantastic football action and all the great playoff and World Series drama. And hopefully the Braves can hoist the trophy for another year. That's all the time we have. A lot of things, hopefully, that you needed to know. Always enjoy coming to you and look forward to our next session. You never know what you're going to get here. I'm quoting Forrest Gump right and left, so people are going to start associating me with that character, but that's fine. He did pretty well. Maybe I'll get invited to the White House like he did. Just a classic movie. Enjoyed it as always. Have a great week, everybody. We will talk to you again next week and tell you everything you need to know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.